Not yet. Okay.
No, not yet. Yep.
Yeah, now. Yes. Calling Chris Anderson in Windsor.
I am. I'm in Studio W2, and Rick Byer is in Chicago. I'm assuming you're not at the Bears game.
I'm not at the Bears game. The Bears game was last night, Chris. It was amazing.
Did they win?
They won with one of the most incredible comebacks of all time. They won in overtime. Yes, you should immediately, in fact, skip the rest of this show.
All right. Well, yeah.
Anyone in our audience will tell you, yeah, go watch the Bears game, because I know your love of American football is so great that this is important.
It burns inside of me, Rick.
Probably shouldn't even have told you who won. That probably kind of ruins it a little bit for you, so now you won't watch it. But look at you. You're back home now.
I know. I finished my last tour of the season.
2 months. You're 2.5 months at home. Your daughter is visiting. It's like you're the lord of the castle there.
I am.
Except
the lord of the manor.
They've kicked you out of the keep. Yeah. Welcome everybody to History Happy Hour. Thanks to Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours for helping to bring you this show, and check out their rich offering of military history tours at StephenAmbroseTours.com. And whether you're watching it live, watching on replay, or listening to the HHH
podcast,
yeah, we're glad you're here. We got an interesting show for you today with a guest from New Zealand talking about her father, who was a POW in World War II. Please let us know what you're drinking. Most of you, if you're joining us from New Zealand, perhaps you're drinking coffee, but from the rest of the world, maybe you have a cocktail. And Chris, we should make a mention of our Patreon supporters, especially our Top Shelf patrons. We're very grateful to all of you Top Shelf patrons. Yes. And, it's Christmas time. So, if you want to, you could join in somebody else's name and give them I don't know how you do that.
There you go.
Yeah. Give them the
gift. Are there enough shopping days left before Christmas that you could mail?
I definitely think there are. Think there are. Yeah. Chris, do we have anybody watching our show today?
Yes. Ann Ballard Bryan has joined us from Little Rock, and Jim Stark, says everyone in the country was rooting for Green Bay except for Rick. Is that true?
That is not true, and because the entire city of Chicago was rooting for the Bears.
Oh, okay. So everybody but anybody in Chicago.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Yeah.
We welcome your hate.
I have no.
Well, we welcome his hate then.
In any, it's quite frankly, I think it's all irrelevant. But
Okay, there you go. Okay. Well, have we killed enough time here? Should we get going? I have to figure out what button I'm going to push here.
All right. When you tell me when you have the finger on the
button. I've lost the thread here. Yeah, go ahead. I'm good. Right. I'm good.
Bar is open.
The bar is open. Chris, Christmas time is always when we get a little wacky on this show, right? We kind of go off in some different directions. So today we're going to be talking to an artist from New Zealand about her father's World War II experience, Sue Heydon. And this guest was suggested to us by someone who is a friend who has been on the road with both you and I, and who is a faithful HHH audience member, Doug McCord. To help us introduce Sue, we asked Doug to join us on the program. And I know, Doug, you're nervous, but you can do this. You can handle it. It's okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So Doug, you ran across Sue Heydon and her story when you and your wife Sid were in New Zealand. That's right? Right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we were fortunate to be on a cruise around New Zealand. And one of the stops was a day stop at a port where Nelson was accessible. Now, Nelson is at the very top of the southern island, and it's a beautiful little community. Sid and I spent the day walking around, and on our way back to the ship, we saw a sign for the Nelson Provincial Museum. Well, being curious people, we went into the museum, and to my great luck, I saw a sign that said special exhibit temporary on World War II. So we went up and went into this exhibit, and it was by an artist, Sue, whom we'll all meet this afternoon, or whatever time of day you are. And it was all about her father, George, and his experiences in World War II. The exhibit one part of the exhibit took our breath away. It was and I believe you have a photo. It was a collection of matches, wooden matches. There we go. And it just took our breath away. And I'll let Sue explain why. But that's how I happened to stumble upon this amazing story.
Oh, fantastic. And so you had no idea before you got there that you were going to go into this museum or even see this exhibit.
We didn't know it existed. We didn't know the museum existed. So it was by pure chance that we happened to go in there.
Well, and we followed Doug's advice that we should talk to Sue Heydon on History Happy Hour. And Sue has been an artist for a very long time, perhaps always been an artist, although she got her arts degree in 2015. The exhibit about her father, George, is called George's War. And as Doug mentioned, it appears at the Nelson Provincial Museum in Nelson, New Zealand. So, Sue Heydon, welcome to History Happy Hour.
Hello, and thank you, and kia ora from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Firstly, it is no longer at the Nelson Provincial Museum. It's currently at the National Army Museum in Waihuru, which is in the other island, the North Island.
So the exhibit continues on.
It's there for 7 months.
Oh,
yes.
fantastic. So, Doug, we're gonna put you in the green room and we're gonna talk to Sue here, but do send me a text if you have a question and you want to jump back in, okay?
Oh, surely will. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and
Green room, that sounds very technical.
I know. And Doug hadn't even you and Doug hadn't even met until a few minutes ago, right before the show, right? So this is your first time talking.
Lovely.
So, Sue, we're going to get into your dad's story and your exhibit, but I'd like to set the scene here with a context question, which is essentially how big is World War II in New Zealand? So here in the United States, people are constantly honoring World War II veterans. They're celebrating World War II anniversaries. There are books about World War II that come out every week. I think Chris and I have interviewed the authors of all of them. And it has an important place in our culture today, 80 years after the war. So what is the situation, comparable situation in New Zealand?
It does have a very important place. And particularly, we have Anzac Day to celebrate or remember veterans from World War I and World War II and subsequent wars, of course. And it's always a very moving ceremony. It's always, and there's a ceremony at dawn locally, which we go to, and it's really cold then. But yeah, but I understand you were talking about the wider picture of war and what World War II and what a huge theatres there were. So many different countries were involved in different ways. And I think today the issues that develop sometimes have started back then, issues between countries and conflicts. And I don't maintain to be a World War II historian. I think it would take a lifetime to understand it all. So what I've tried to do is to get to know my father because he was 10. I was 10 when he died, and he worked nights. So I didn't really know him very well. He also didn't talk about his experiences. I mean, why would he when they probably haunted his nights?
Yeah.
Why would he get up in the day? Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about, I'm going to hazard a guess here to say that most people don't know an awful lot about New Zealand in the 1930s and 1940s. So why don't you tell us a little bit sort of about what New Zealand was like then and sort of where your father comes from?
Okay, so my father was born in 1904, right at the bottom of the South Island, probably, according to his birth certificate, in a place called Gore. And in the bottom part of the South Island, people roll their R's, so I'm not sure if I've got that pronunciation correct. And he was born into a huge family. I called them a rumbustious family. kind of loud and they were a bit much for my mother. She kind of and I don't really know. I can only guess what New Zealand was like in the 1930s, as I wasn't there. But growing up as I was in the 50s, everything was quite, there were meat and 3 vegetables and not a lot of, I first ate pizza when I went to live in Wellington and curry and later on in the 90s. So I think life was perhaps more simple. I understand during the war, it was incredible. Everyone pulled together to support our war effort. Anyone who wasn't employed had to be involved with supporting the war. And this is from papers past, our historical reference library archives, where you can actually Google information and lists of all the people who went. New Zealand had a very active role in World War II.
So your father passed away when you were 10, is that right?
Yeah. 1963.
Yeah. So you got involved at some point much later on a long journey of kind of trying to explore and document your father's World War II story and visiting sites associated with that story, creating the exhibit. How did that whole effort, how and when did it get started?
Okay, so, it was when we first went to Austria. So growing up as a child, hanging in our hallway was a picture of this place called St. Johann in the summer and winter. So it was this beautiful village, with snow on the mountains in the winter and beautiful Swiss houses in the summer. And I always understood that's where my father was as a prisoner of war. And that's all we knew when we went to Austria, which actually, in the end, I discovered it would have been where he was at the end of the war, where he was marched to at the end of the war. But we got to meet wonderful people. We found a beautiful memorial, mainly to the Russian prisoners who were very abysmally treated, but also referred to Allied prisoners. And we met a man there called Adolf, who had been 2 during the war, who actually took us into his house. And I ended up being interviewed for the Pongau Times. It was called, although it was called St. Johann when we went there, Hitler named it Market Pongau because, as our friend said, it was far too holy. St. Johann was far too holy a name for Hitler. So, so that's when it started. And when I came back, I resolved to research more, accessed the Stalag 18A Facebook page, which was the overarching camp in Austria, where my father finally went as a prisoner, or was most of the time. And so it went on from there. And you showed the photo of the Liberation Questionnaire, Rick, a little while ago.
Yeah, we were talking before the show, and this is the Liberation Questionnaire, and I know your father filled it out in 1945. How did you find out about it, and what did you learn from it?
This was accessed through information from the Stalag 18A Facebook page. A lovely man called Ian Brown, who lives in an area of London, and he was looking to find out about his father, who was also similarly a prisoner of war in Austria. But this was this was obtained from the National Archives in Kew in London. Quite a procedure to get it, and it was just so special to see his writing.
This was a form that was filled out by all prisoners of war who returned to England.
It's a bit conflicting. I understand that it was compulsory, and then someone else said, well, no, it wasn't. So it's one of those things about history, the intangibility of history. You kind of pick through things. It's like looking at my dad's history and talking to different people who, there was the New Zealand Defence Forces who was very helpful, David Gibson, who they had kind of understandings of when things occurred, and sometimes it's a year out. But so I can only understand that maybe this happened.
But
So
you,
what? Oh, go ahead, Rick.
no, I was just going to let you finish your thought about how special it was to see the Liberation Questionnaire.
Yeah, it was really moving. I think it's very moving was to see his writing and understand where he was. There was a typo, and he got one of the years wrong. I think it was the beginning, but so those were his three main. If you go further down the list with the numbers are his three main work camps, and we actually visited one of them. We were going to go to the other two, but driving on the other side of the road became a challenge. And they were in quite remote areas. So it was really, really, really special to finally find it. And as I say, I thought he could have filled it out with more detail. He did say that when there was a question on one of the other, there were 3 pages of the questionnaire. He said he would need more paper to record all the times he'd subverted the enemy, or words to that effect. And I thought that was a very creative way. But I understand that he was sick. He wasn't very well. He had post-traumatic stress, or shell shock as it was called then, and probably particularly didn't actually want to do this, But anyway.
Well, so why don't we, before we kind of get into the installation itself, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit more about what his war service was? I know we had one question about how he was captured, and I'd start even before that. How does he come to enter service? Because he's an older man, and kind of give us some sense of what his service is like up until he gets captured, why he's captured.
Well, okay, so I think that I understand your question about why he was older. I think that he really wanted to go. He had this kind of he was really excited about going. He was a territorial 4 or 5 years before, and I have a picture of him, which I don't know if you have, of him in a group of men looking forward to going. And it was like, this was their big adventure. There'd been a recession in New Zealand, a depression, and everyone in the end became really keen to go. And they seemed to forget about World War I. So he was a private, and as a territorial, initially he was... he married my mother in November 1940, and 2 weeks later he went in the Dominion Monarch, and eventually to Austria, of course, with many other Kiwis. There's pictures of the Dominion Monarch, and just so many men on board to go. And I understand in Egypt they trained, so he didn't fight in Egypt at that time. And then they decided to go to Greece, which, the situation had erupted where Hitler went to help Italy. And it was just, I have the diary someone sent me from the archives of his particular reinforcement battalion, and it sounded like it was so disorganized. They were outgunned and outmanned, just didn't have the air power that the Germans had. And my father was captured near the port of Kalamata, where they were defending the port so that they could, at that stage they were evacuating, so that they could evacuate their other soldiers. So by the time it was my father's turn, it was too late. And something like, how many prisoners? Please excuse me. I've written it down here. I think there were about 18,000 people taken prisoner there.
And they were mostly New Zealanders?
Yeah. Yeah. So huge numbers. And he was taken to a camp in Corinth. Well, it was a transit camp, and the conditions were absolutely abysmal. Very limited water, very limited food, not enough room for them all to sleep inside. Some slept in holes in the ground outside. And I understand recently I heard that the Germans actually used the lack of food as a control to control the prisoners. But also they must have really, really not expected so many prisoners, I think. But there's a photographer that I managed to find on the Greece at World War II archives called Franz Peter Wexler, who I managed to get permission to use the photographs, and he took very, very revealing photographs of the camp at Corinth. And there's one picture of these soldiers looking at in a pile of wood for food. Yeah. So, and then from there, he was marched. They were marched over this pass called the Lamia Pass to the Lamia railway station, and there was 30 kilometres, and none of them were in the condition to do that, of course. And there's some things that I remember as a child that were part of our family history. And I remember that at one time my father couldn't walk, and someone put him on a horse. And of course, I'm very grateful that they did that, because they shot the people who couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And so, yes, so maybe that was the occasion when he was put on a horse. And then he went to Salonika, which is Thessaloniki now, and that was equally horrible. It was another transit camp. And apparently he was there about 6 weeks, and then he was transported to what was Slovenia, what used to be Yugoslavia, and I don't know how long he was there, but that was Stalag, and then they became Stalag 18D, and we went there. We visited there when we went back to Austria our second time, and I felt very strongly there were traces of the history, and there was a window particularly that was like a window I had an old photograph of the camp when the prisoners were. So that was quite, and I collected soil there. So that was quite moving, I think. Yeah.
So he was captured in 1941.
Sorry. Yes.
All
in 1941. Yeah.
Okay.
So he would have been in the camps for 4.5 years.
4 years, 4 days.
Approximately.
I used to think it was 4.5 years until I actually counted the days when I was doing the matchsticks.
Oh, wow. A lot of people have a parent or a grandparent who served in World War II, and who they set out to do some research, and they don't have a great deal of information because the person wouldn't talk much about it, and they don't have a lot of papers. And I'm struck. I looked through the 600-page booklet, or whatever you want to call it, that you put together as kind of your at the beginning of your process on the exhibit. You put in an amazing amount of research to kind of track him down, and I would say maybe what, for somebody who's starting out or thinking about doing that, what would you tell them, where to go? How do you get help? How do you begin to try to piece together a story that you don't have any first person account of?
Good question. That's a big question. I don't know. Maybe contact the Stalag 18A Facebook page group. And I'm sure they would, I mean, even if your dear relative, your loved one wasn't a prisoner in Austria, I'm sure Ian Brown, hi Ian Brown, I'm sure he would direct you to the place where you would find out more information. It was so amazing, all the people who helped me. I'm sorry, I'm not really answering your question. I'm just saying, talking about it from my point of view, because it is a huge, huge issue. I don't even remember how I actually found out about this particular Facebook page, but it was really, really helpful. But there were so many archives. I think archivists are wonderful people and very patient and always delighted when you find out information that you want. I have had conversations during COVID with a girl at the Swiss archives who thought I might be Australian, and I let her know in certain terms that I was a Kiwi. And she was, so we talked about on that level, but at the same time, she was really helpful. They sent information, very simple information about where they thought where my father was captured. So that's when I found out he was captured in Kalamata. And then there was the Greece at World War II archives with the amazing pictures and Franz Peter Wexler's photographs, and learning about him was really interesting. And then so the two German archives, and then when we went to Austria, we went to visit the farm where my father was, and that was so special. But how that happened was I just knew that it was in Zirknitz, which is about 18 minutes away from Graz in Austria. And I Googled the area and came up with this wine bar, and they then passed me on to the Culture House in Austria in this area called St. Stefan, which was very near Zirknitz. And we went there, and that was amazing. There were so many there were two archivists and an interpreter and a lovely man called Franz, who was 2 during the war and recalled the prisoners and showed me the barn where they were, and the fact that his father didn't like the prisoners because they burnt all his firewood and didn't do any work. And yeah, it was incredible. And this also with the Stalag 18A Facebook page, someone posted up that there was a letter on eBay from my father to my mother, and we bought it, and it was from Florida. How incredible is that? Wow. So my mother had sold the letters. I think maybe she was quite short of money after my father died, and she'd firmly glued the letters down so that, and I knew, as a child, I'd sneaked, and read the letters, and they were soppy love letters, really. And I realised later it was quite a beautiful letter. But so I sort of teased this letter apart. I tried steaming it, and it was pretty good glue after all that time. Finally, I got it apart, and I realised that it would be only someone close to my father who would do that, because, I was undermining the collectability. So, yeah.
So you didn't know very much when you started, and you started to find out more. When did you decide, because you've done other installations, other works of art, what made you decide that you wanted to turn to art as a way to kind of explain the story?
that's what I always do. Because I'm, that's the way I work. I work visually, and that the idea of the matchsticks actually came quite quickly because I recall, and I haven't talked about those, have I?
Yeah, what is the idea of the matchsticks?
Okay, one of the things I knew, just a knowing from when I was a child, that my father lit a match every day to remove the maggots from his food. And that's just something I just knew, yeah. So the matches are actually dated probably from the late 1800s, so they're called Vesta matches. They're actually quite beautiful. So they're wax and using thread with a little drop of phosphorus on the top. And it was this time last year I put all the calendar pages together with museum wax holding them.
So for the matches, you have one match for every day he was in prison.
Yes.
So
How many was
that?
Hang on.
I got to check your fact sheet.
I know. I'm terrible. When I'm nervous, I forget. Oh, gosh, I had it written down. Please excuse me.
We're sorry if we're making you nervous.
No, that's all right. You would expect that.
Well, it's 4 years and 4 days. So that's...
Yeah. It's 1,500. I'm glad this isn't formal. Tell me I've lost it.
It's okay. Now let's just strike the question from the proceeding.
Okay, here. Sorry, 1,576 Vesta matches.
Did you have to light each one and then blow it out?
Yes. And I burnt my finger a few times. and also some of them are darker. And some of them are lighter, and the darker ones in the darker areas are where I perceived that would have been particularly hard for him. So particularly at the beginning and the end of the war.
So just to remind everybody, we're chatting with Sue Heydon, who is an artist in New Zealand who created an exhibit called George's War about her father's World War II experience, most of which was in prison camps. He was one of more than 100,000 New Zealand soldiers who went overseas during World War II. There's other things in your exhibit that I found really interesting, and maybe we can just throw up a couple of pictures and you can tell us about them. One is that's jars, and it looks like they're Red Cross jars and they're filled with something, but I can't quite see what. So can you give us a clue what's going on in this part of the exhibit?
Right. Well, this is my recognition of the Red Cross's significance in my father's survival. He always said that without the Red Cross, he would not have survived. And he was always very encouraging for us to support them. And that's the Red Cross and St. John, who had an equal part in sending Red Cross parcels of food and clothing to the prisoners of war. They tried to make it regularly that these parcels were sent, but given wartime conditions, sometimes they weren't as successful as they wanted. So the symbol of the Red Cross is taken from my mother studied during the war. My mother studied for some Red Cross certificates in sanitation and home nursing. And so that's a kind of a genuine World War II label. And the contents are actually wool, felted kidney pills. My father, one of my father's illnesses was kidney failure. He actually died of kidney failure. And New Zealand was incredible. So there was a booklet that went out of comforts for the troops, and with including knitting patterns. And so I understand that wool was very much in fashion then, and woolen garments were sent in large quantities along with pajamas and other items of clothing that were deemed helpful to the prisoners. And so this idea of wool and the stitching of clothing, the kidney pills have a stitch in each one, and the kidney pills in the bottles kind of encompass my suggestion that I hope my father received some medical attention. He actually went to hospital twice in 2 different places during his time as a prisoner of war, and the bottles are aged. I always enjoy distressing things to refer to the bombing of the main Stalag 18A in Wolfsburg in at the end of 1944, and my father was actually there then. So it was the hospital that was bombed. So these are the bottles that survived. I guess. Yeah.
And so another element of the exhibit is you have dirt from various places. Could you explain a little bit about that, kind of the inspiration and what folks would be looking at there?
So the soil is in acrylic boxes where we visit from the camps we visited. And there is a map underneath, hand-drawn by a prisoner of war of this area, Austria. And it's really interesting. One of the boxes, not the one in the front, from St. Johann, I beg your pardon, from Zirknitz, which was farm soil, you can see it's very near on the map, this St. Stephan, which is right next to Zirknitz. So that was quite cool. So I helped myself to the soil, and later I did obtain permission, because here in New Zealand it is very important to get permission when using soil and other materials that one gathers. And I did manage to get it when I was challenged about it later. But so the one from Zirknitz, the farm where my dad was I asked Franz, who the man who'd been to, Franz Herunter, during the war, I asked him if we could get it, and he had a very sharp spade, and I don't know if anyone knows, but he very carefully turfed the soil in squares and put it aside. It was like I'd learned at Girl Guides to do, and carefully remove the worms, and it was like a little ceremony, and put it in the container for me. So that was really, really lovely. The one at the front in the picture was from Marburg, Maribor, and that was brick dust from right underneath the buildings where they were. There's one from Wolfsburg, where we actually also visited, of course, and that's now a light industrial site. So that was the main camp, and that was very gravelly. And I managed to get permission from the mayor to use it, which was just lovely. And then, gosh, where's the other one? Oh, yes, St. Johann. So St. Johann was actually, the soil was at the bottom of mole holes near the memorial, because I wasn't sure exactly where the camp was the first time I visited. Yeah.
Let me ask you about one more thing you sent us a picture of. I'm not even sure what we're seeing here. So tell me.
Okay. These are the 5 calendar pages. And it was important to me that they were lit as they are, to give the idea of the intangibility of time. You know, I'm trying to look through to find out things here, and there's actually shadows at the top too. So there's 2 shadows that appear from the calendar pages. So in the top half, you can see the actual acrylic sheets that were made with the matches on, and then the underneath is the shadows, and you get the faint trace of the of the difference, of the contrast between where the matches are and where they aren't.
Okay, so that's that's tied in with the matches. Okay, didn't know. Got that.
So why don't you? One of the things that came out when I was looking through that book that we saw a copy of was your mom, because I mean, obviously, they'd only just been married when your father went away. Could you tell us a little bit about what? I know it's not the focus of the exhibit, but what's her war like? Because she doesn't know really what's happened to her husband. I mean, is there communication between them during the war, or I mean, what? So tell us just a little bit about your mom and her part in this story.
Okay. Yes, I realised that everything. There was obviously no internet and no immediate conversation. So she found out he was a prisoner some months after he was taken. It was also, lists were published in the paper, but initially she got a card to say he was missing. And it must have been so tough, because she told me people had said, well, yes, so-and-so was missing, and then they were found dead. So she lived with this all the time, and just not knowing, and the worry, it must have been absolutely very difficult. But I think that that war bred a certain strength in a generation of people that perhaps I don't have. So she actually, I just go forward a bit. So since then, someone had said, well, are you going to produce an installation relating to your mother? And that's actually what I'm about to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and she was incredible. Before the war, she did all these things like that. She was actually more or less a university lecturer that I actually didn't know about. How dare she that I didn't know, but she had a really amazing, busy life. She debated and she acted, and was a lecturer. And I found out a lot of information in some archives recently about her. So that's all very exciting. At the time, she studied at the Red Cross in Dunedin. She ended up, she went in various places in New Zealand, but she studied. No, sorry, it was Christchurch. She produced these 2 certificates that I have, and I have the little booklet that she, was obviously her study notes, and she also packed parcels in Dunedin with a group of women, and her job was to sew the parcels together with canvas, and they were then very carefully they were sent. So they were checked and weighed, and it was. I have a picture of my mother actually as one. She must have been the only married woman in the picture, because it had Mrs. George Heydon, which was the thing then, to use your husband's name, and the others just had their Christian names and their surnames, no married status. And she wrote him letters and she sent him parcels. Actually, recently, from some archives, I found one of the cards. So when they got parcels, they must have had some kind of form that the prisoners then had to sign off on and return, because this was in an archives in New Zealand, and it mentioned when my mother, I don't know how much my mother knew about it, but it was where my mother was packing parcels that this particular thing came. And there was a mention of when the parcels arrived, and then it had in red pencil, chocolate arrived. So, and twice at least my father received chocolate at the beginning of the war, which was quite, because I recall in the letters my father had asked for chocolate. Yeah.
So you dug pretty deep here. I think it's fair to say, if you're leafing through the pages of stuff that you put together, the book that you put together.
That's the letter. Sorry. I don't know if you can hear
That's
me.
one of the letters, right?
That's the letter we bought off eBay. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But good, we get an ad in for eBay there. That's appropriate. Is there anything that you were surprised by in all this digging? I mean, you spent years on this. Is there anything that you found that you said, "Oh, this is really shocking," or anything that you hoped to find that just remained elusive and you couldn't find?
I was shocked at the photographs. There's of the camps, and I mean, you can read about it, but to actually see what it was like, and I'm thinking of Greece here, was revealing. I guess I would have liked to know the exact times when he was in various places, but that wasn't to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about when he got home and kind of how do you think this experience impacted him? Because obviously you said, you didn't know him very well because you were only a little girl, but clearly it had some impact on him. So what do you think? So when did he come home, and what do you think how this impacted him?
He came home in 1945. After going to England, and my mother was really cross that he went to England. She wanted him to come straight home, but that wasn't possible because there was very limited shipping, of course, because a lot of them had been destroyed. So he spent some time in London. Yes, I think that the war changed both my parents incredibly. They had 18 years together after he returned, and of course I was born in 1953, and I think I was probably really, treasured, spoiled, an only child. But I have delightful pictures of them setting up their house. Initially they went to a beach called Kaitiritiri in near Nelson in Tasman, where they looked after the store and the campground for about 4.5 years. My mother deliberately took my father away from the cities to a quieter place. And I think they really always loved that. There's a memorial to my parents that I put on the seat outside the shop there because I think that was a really lovely place for them to go. And then they bought a place in an area in Nelson, and just to have a picture of my father driving the Morris Minor, and they had 3 cows and just their house, and I thought, they were trying to reach normality. And I think gradually my father had these medical conditions, and gradually he withdrew into himself. And he received a pension about 2 months before he died. My mother had written asking for help, for financial help, and they were refused. And then he was defined as 100% disabled, and got his pension. And after he died, I went through the medical forms that were available. They were really revealing from New Zealand Defence Forces. And someone had ticked that his illnesses were not a result of his military service, which I disputed, really.
Yeah.
So look, you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about World War II and your father's role in it. And how has your work on his story changed or refocused your ideas about the war or his experience?
I've just realised what a small part of the whole World War II, my father's part one. I actually bought a set of encyclopedias which were produced just soon after the war. I think with time analysis takes apart, but these were kind of direct photographs describing all the different theatres, and it's just astounding. Okay, on those grounds, it was quite moving for me to put the exhibition together at the museum and to open it, and I hadn't realised that that was going to happen, and in a way, I guess, has made me feel more comfortable to have done that, to remember him. It was always very important to me that the children who'd never met him, we have 2 sons, the children learnt about, what had happened then. And so hence the 2 books. I have 2 copies of the book to give to one son each. Yeah, and I would hope to do so with my mother too, although they knew my mother, but they didn't know what happened before I was born. But, yeah.
I want to bring back Doug McCord to the stage here. And Doug, as long as you haven't fallen asleep there in the green room.
I have not.
Okay, right. And I don't know if you, I'm curious if you have a question for Sue, or having seen her exhibit but not having heard her talk, if you have something that sort of surprised you or that you want to respond to from what she said.
One thing that occurred to me, can you hear okay? I can't hear. Okay. Did all the New Zealanders go to the war in Europe, or did any go to what we call the Pacific Theater, fighting the Japanese?
Yes, in both theatres.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Well, Doug, first of all, Doug, thank you for introducing us to Sue Heydon. We appreciate your always looking out for History Happy Hour. And thank you for coming on the show today.
You're very welcome. I feel honored to be here.
Rick, we have to get him, like, I don't know, a History Happy Hour shirt or something, I think.
We don't have a shirt.
Well, we got to get one. That's why we have to get one.
We have a hat, but he hasn't been on 5 times. I don't know.
We can put the hat over his chest. Oh my God!
We can cut the hat up into pieces.
Oh, wow.
But Doug, thank you so much. And Sue Heydon, who is the creator of the exhibit George's War. And where is the exhibit right now, Sue? I mean, I'm sure that our whole audience is tromping to New Zealand to see it, but just tell us where the exhibit is right at the moment.
The National Army Museum at Wairuru.
Okay.
In the North Island.
Yeah. And if we can put you on the spot to say, because I know you don't have a website, but if you have do you have an email? If people are interested, can they email you? Can you tell us that?
Yes. Okay. It's a bit complicated.
Okay. It's a bit complicated.
Maybe long story, but I'll just spell it out and then you'll know. Okay. It's S for snake. N for Nelly. O 3 O's. K NZ @gmail.com.
So that's NZ for those of you who are American. So it's SNOOONZ @gmail.com. Is that correct?
Sorry, K. SNOOOK.
K. We're going to have to do another show on why you chose that email address.
Yes, yeah. Interesting story.
Sue Heydon, thank you so much for joining us today from New Zealand in the morning on Monday. We're still enjoying Sunday here, but we appreciate you traveling back through time to be with us. And good job on your exhibit, and best wishes for the exhibit that you're doing on your mom.
And happy Christmas, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lovely to meet you, Doug, and thank you.
Likewise.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
bye-bye.
And Doug, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your contributing. Any last words from you?
Yes, 2 last words. I hope it's not last line. one thing I discovered in my minor participation here is how much work goes in behind the scenes. I'm used to sitting down at my computer on a 4 o'clock on a Sunday and watching the show. I had no idea how much planning, communications, and I didn't realize that HHH was really 3 pillars. You and Rick, or you and Chris are 2 of them. And the third one is Cheryl.
Cheryl.
You often speak of her, but seldom do we see her. So she's a marvelous researcher and participant in History Happy Hour. So I'd like to thank all 3 of you for doing what you do. And to anyone listening, if you're already contributing, please consider having 1 less coffee. Go to Dunkin' 1 less times, Wawa, Buc-ee's, and putting that towards History Happy Hour.
Yes.
There's a lot of work that goes on, and I never realized it. I myself will walk the talk, and I'll increase my, PayPal, whatever, however you get the money. So,
Thank you, Doug.
I don't even know. It's a mystery to me too. Doug McCord, thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug.
We'll see you, or you'll see us in coming weeks as well.
Terrific.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Okay, Chris.
Yes.
We have a show next week.
We do.
History Happy goes on and on. We have episode 282.
Holy cow, Batman.
Next week. Thank you, Robin. And next week we have Marcus Gibson, who's the author of The Greatest Force.
Yeah.
About what do we know about this book?
Well, I mean, it's kind of causing a bit of a stir because Marcus is gone back in, very kind of data-driven look at Bomber Command, and he comes out with a much different verdict on the effectiveness of Bomber Command than is kind of currently the believed wisdom. So he's saying that Bomber Command is kind of instrumental in the defeat of Germany, he paints a different picture of.
So this has got to be of great interest to someone who leads Air Force tours.
That does have some bearing on my tours, yes, and it certainly creates quite a stir here in England. So
okay,
anxious to hear what he has to say.
So I'm looking forward to having him on next week. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Please, first of all, happy holidays, wonderful
Merry
Christmas,
Yep.
and I think we have a day left in Hanukkah, so enjoy that as well, or whatever you're doing. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us if you want on Facebook. Shout at us on Blue Sky. Listen to our podcast and back us on Patreon and browse historyhappyhour.com.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.